Hello, corporate badasses. Hi. I wanted to come on today and talk about low level versus high level questions. This is something that actually came up as part of the executive reboot in one of the Facebook conversations and threads that we were having. And I wanted to do a longer training on what I mean by low level versus high level questions. Now, to preface this conversation, I want to start out with zooming out a little bit away from 15-minute ally meetings. So, most of the conversation that we've had so far in terms of trusting in your executive team has been centered around how to conduct 15-minute ally meetings and build trust in that way. But going all the way back to module one, where I speak about getting out of the weeds and stop doing what you're good at, I also share with you that getting out of the weeds is more about communication than it is delegation. And of course, the delegation is a part of that, but we start first with how we're communicating to executive leadership. So, in today's conversation about low level versus high level questions, I'm actually talking more so about your everyday. So, your regular one on ones with your boss, your team meetings that you're conducting or that you're a part of, any sort of leadership team meetings, right? Full, big, large meetings. Any time that you're in front of executive leadership at all, if you're in a Q&A situation, like whatever that might be, basically, how are you communicating with executive leadership, with your peers? Are you communicating with low level questions or are you communicating with high level questions? Because our goal is for you to begin to be seen as a senior executive leader. So shifting your questions into this high level way is going to start to allow you to be seen as that executive leader long before you actually become one. Okay, so that's what we're talking about today. This is not, it can happen as part of your 15-minute ally meetings, but that's not the conversation that we're having right now. This is literally just all the time. You can do this in your work right away, every single day, every time you ask a question, low level or do high level versus low level questions. So, what do I mean by high level? What I don't mean is right or wrong. So, high level questions are not meant to be seen as better than low level questions, but they are to show you that when we're shifting perception, high level questions are going to make you sound and act more and think and make decisions more like a senior executive leader than low level questions. But you're going to find yourself asking low level questions all day long, right? If you're talking about your projects and stuff that you're working on. I just don't want you to use it as an opportunity to start to pretend, and I say pretend because it's a lie, that you're bad at your job, right? I ask so many low level questions. That must mean I'm not good at my job. No, you're perfectly fine at your job if all you do is ask low level questions. That's fine. But what I want you to know is that it's not going to lead to an executive level promotion. And I think this is such an important discernment as we begin to take ownership of our career, right? That's our goal here. So I blocked low level and high level questions into three categories, and I'm going to show you in each of these categories what those types of questions look like. So the first category is basically asking questions that are in the weeds versus high level questions, right? So literally like visionary, expansive questions versus asking questions that are in the weeds. So what do in the weeds questions look like? Like, let's say if you're asking somebody directly about their project, what they're working on, all of those are low level questions. Asking somebody about a specific, teammate, or asking about a really specific granular problem, asking another person about their area of expertise. If you're in a larger meeting, and you have an opportunity to ask a question of a colleague who's presenting something, and you ask a question like, well, how are you going to do that? That's a low level question. It's very weedsy. It's tactical. It's about the actual project itself. And it's like deep into the details. Okay. Again, not good or bad. It just doesn't shine light on you and your executive leadership. So, what are the higher level questions in that category? Asking somebody about they'll be talking about the project that they're working on and asking how it ties into the organization's vision. Asking somebody about how they plan to anticipate some obstacles, right, for that project versus like, how are you going to get customers? That's kind of weedsy versus how are you going to get customers on a consistent basis to fill our pipeline, and then you tie it into the organization's vision, right? Something like that, right? So really tying everything back to the bigger goal, the three pillars, asking questions that are about tying it into, oh, here's one that I really love is if you're in a management meeting and you're like, well, Marcia said earlier about, and you say something kind of high level visionary about what Marcia said, how does what you're working on tie into her vision, right? Something like that. So just really thinking about how can I pull my questions out, quite literally out of the weeds, out of that expertise and into the broader picture, the three pillars that I talk about in module 1, the vision, what the organization cares about, what your boss cares about, like anything that sort of broadens that conversation out. The second category of low level, high level questions are short term versus long term questions. So a short term question is something about the immediate impact of something versus the long term impact of whatever that might be. Also, like for instance, I think one of the low level versus high level questions that came up inside of the executive reboot was like asking your boss or who is asking an executive that's the CMO how they became CMO, which would just be like a small, like little tiny part of their career journey, to a bigger question, which is like, what were some decisions that they had to make early on in their career that allowed them later to become CMO, right? So that's like the longer term vision. That's a better question. Another question that we tend to ask about our own career development is like when we are talking about our 1X vision versus our 3X vision, where we're saying, how do I get promoted to senior manager versus how do I get promoted eventually to SVP, right? That's an example. And the reason why asking long-term questions versus short-term questions is high level versus low level is because executive leaders are always future focused. They're looking to how is this going to affect the future of our company, and they're of course acting in the immediate, right? They're making quick decisions, but it's based on the long-term growth of the company. Generally speaking, that's what's valued most in executive leaders, is that they can span out and they can see that. And so if on a micro level you can start to show leadership that I can span out, I can ask a bigger question about long-term growth versus just the short teeny tiny equation. And then the third type of question that is high level category for high level versus low level is when you talk about your problems without offering any ideas or solutions first. And this comes up a lot in one-on-ones with your boss. So you'll be saying, I'm having trouble with my teammate. Or your boss will say, hey, this isn't being delivered on time. And then you get into the weeds by saying something like, this isn't, it's because of this and this and this and this and this, and all these details about what's happening, versus the solution-based questions, which is, well, I'm having trouble with this employee and I reached out to them and I said XYZ, but that doesn't seem to be working. What are your thoughts about how I can move forward, right? That's a really great high level question. It starts to set you up as a problem solver, as a person who takes proactive initiative, and most importantly, it shows that you aren't just asking your boss to do your job for you, right? So that's another example of a high level versus low level question. I also don't want to confuse high level versus low level questions with being long. You can have a lot of really good high level questions that are quite simple, like why? That's a great high level question. It's actually, maybe I should have started this training with the question why, right? That is like the ultimate most like beneficial high level question. So let's say even in a 15-minute ally meeting, you're engaging with someone and they're talking about their leadership journey and how they've made, what decisions they made early on in their career to become CMO, and then they kind of are talking about it, and then you just want to go deeper. You want to ask why is such a good high level question. What are your concerns is another great high level question. Really engaging with them on like that deeper curious level where it's like taking the onion and then just peeling it and peeling it and peeling it and peeling it, and you just want to get deeper, 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 deeper into the conversation. That's different than going deep into the weeds. It's more of like unpeeling the onion so that you can start to see all the nuances of how they think and why they make decisions, right? Speaking with that level of curiosity is going to pique their interest. And the other thing that we're showing executive leadership when we begin to build trust in this way is that we are curious people. We ask questions. We don't just perform. We're not just executors. We're not just good at our job. We're idea people. We have ideas. We think about things deeply. And so asking more high level questions are going to show executive leadership that you're ready for that higher executive level. Let me know what your questions let me know what your questions are about this conversation. And otherwise, I can't wait to see how you're able to begin literally immediately shift your questions that you continuously and repeatedly ask over and over again to a higher level question. All right, take care, everyone. Bye.